There we go. As Sarah mentioned, not a great visual there of Sharia, the Threat to America, a book that I would commend to you from which much of this is drawn. Newt gave us a very nice plug. Patrick was among the co-authors, 19 in all, helped put together really, I think, a very authoritative rendering of the problem that we're facing. Next slide. Which is Sharia. I think fundamentally we talk about terrorism, we talk about the countering violent extremism project, whatever you want to call it. This is what the enemy calls it, and it is what animates them. What is it? Next slide, please. It is, of course, more than just the path. It is a comprehensive totalitarian program that has as its goal world domination. Sounds crazy, but yeah, so did Mein Kampf, so did the Communist Manifesto, and it's very much the same, except it's got a God in it. It is brutally repressive. It is anti-constitutional. Make no bones about it. And its adherents do, in fact, believe that it is God's will that they impose it worldwide. Next slide, please. As a result, it is about power, not about faith. It has a patina of religion to it, to be sure, but most of it involves power. And that gives us a basis upon which to deal with it. Whereas if we think it's about religion, under our Constitution, our political DNA, we're supposed to give it a lot of slack. Next slide. Just to come back to the constitutional point, when you sometimes hear people tell you that, no, actually it's completely compatible with the Constitution of the United States, there are two possibilities. One is that they haven't a clue what they're talking about. And if you're hearing that from people who are known commodities, prominent figures in the Muslim community, that's not a possibility. The other option, which applies, is that they're lying to you, because it is absolutely incompatible. And look no further than, of course, the law of the land in Saudi Arabia to see how compatible this would be with our program. Next slide. The Brotherhood, as Sarah mentioned, is all about the Sharia project. It is fundamentally, at its core, the prime mover behind bringing it worldwide under a caliph who they hope to reestablish to rule according to it. Next slide. These are, and you can't see these characters very well, this is al-Zawahiri al-Hiri on the left, current leader of al-Qaeda, and the late and unlamented past leader, Osama bin Laden. The difference is only one of tactics. The Muslim Brotherhood is perfectly willing to use violence, as al-Qaeda does. It's just it wants to use it when it will be effective, not a foolish proposition. Next slide. This is from their own strategic plan, which providentially we secured back in 2004 through an amazing set of circumstances, which I won't have time to get into, but suffice it to say, it couldn't be more clear. If there were any doubt based upon the credo that Shara just shared with you, that what they're interested in doing is destroying the United States of America, look no further than the explanatory memorandum. Next slide. Helpfully attached to that memorandum was a list of 29 groups identified by the Muslim Brotherhood's leader, Muhammad Akram, as their organizations and organizations of their friends. This is dated 1991. Even today, these are most, if not virtually all, of the most prominent Muslim American organizations. Muslim American organizations, most prominent, Muslim Brotherhood. Get it? Next slide. These are examples of civilization jihad, the kind of thing that the strategic plan says you must engage in if you cannot use violence, at least temporarily, until you've created conditions under which you can. We don't have time to get into all of these. I'd be happy to discuss them in Q&A if you'd like. Suffice it to say, no civil society institution in this country is being neglected as a target of influence operations by the Muslim Brotherhood, and that is particularly true of the United States government, and indeed governments at every level. I'm going to go through that now in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. These are 7 individuals. I'm just going to throw these at you very quickly. Be happy again to talk to you more about them, that exemplify the problem within the United States government today. Arguably, nobody has done more to expose these characters than my friend Patrick Poole, and he'll, I'm sure, want to talk a little bit about them. But let me just go through these folks quickly. They have been identified, most of them, as the sorts of people that you don't want really anywhere near policy. In a course that we've done called MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com, and in letters that were sent by 5 members of this body, led by Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. You'll be hearing from Congressman Louis Gohmert, I hope, shortly. He is one of them as well. Congressman Trent Franks, who's represented by his brilliant aide, Jackie Pick. Congressman Lynn Westmoreland and Congressman Tom Rooney asked 5 inspectors general whether these characters and the access that they have to high government office, as I'm going to show you, could be contributing to policies, which I'm also going to show you, that are aligning increasingly, as Sarah mentioned, with those of the Muslim Brotherhood. Quickly, next slide. You've been hearing a lot about her because this lady was the one that everybody wanted to focus on in attacking Michelle Bachmann, as though these other 4 members didn't have anything to do with this, for having raised the question as to whether this woman's family ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, given her job as the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Department of State, might be contributing to this policy alignment issue. What are those ties? Well, it turns out it's not just her late father, it's not just her mother, it's not just her brother, it's not even just her sister, who have all been involved in a family business known as the Institute for Muslim Minority Affairs, IMMA. Huma Abedin herself was associated with that family business, which was created by one of the top Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda financiers in the world. Did you hear that? Created by one of the top Muslim Brotherhood operatives in the world, Abdullah Omar Nassif. Its mission is to promote that strategic plan, that civilization jihad in America and elsewhere where Muslims are in the minority. This is a problem, especially since, as you may or may not be able to see down here at the bottom, a quote from the Washington Post. Quote, Abedin is one of Clinton's most trusted advisors on the Middle East. When Clinton hosts meetings on the region, Abedin's advice is always sought. Now, this was a couple of years ago. Imagine what it's like now. Next slide, please. Rashid Hussain, you may or may not have ever heard of. He was formerly a deputy associate counsel in the White House. He is now what the president likes to call his special envoy to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. I know that the Emmett audience actually knows what that is, the OIC. Most Americans don't. It is the most powerful multinational bloc, I would argue, in the world today. Smaller than the UN, but it's largely running the UN now. Rashid Hussain, as you see here, has ties in numerous ways to the Muslim Brotherhood, and you can bet that what he is promoting as a Hafiz of the Quran, Hafiz of the Quran, of course, being someone who has memorized the entire book. In other words, somebody who is really into this Sharia business is, I'm afraid, promoting the OIC's agenda rather than representing ours at that organization. Mohammed Ali Biari, the congressman, has asked a lot of questions properly about Mohammed Ali Biari. This is a guy who has been running a Muslim Brotherhood Front organization in Dallas, Texas, currently a member of the Department of Homeland Security Advisory Council, excuse me, Advisory Council. Thank you, Patrick. He is also associated with an organization known as the Association of Muslim Jurists of Americas, one of the prominent, in fact, probably most influential of the Muslim Brotherhood fronts, using religious edicts, fatwas, to direct the Muslim Brotherhood's agenda. This is a guy who I would argue, and again, Patrick knows a lot more about this than I, has been very destructive to our national security because he was the one who helped engineer, with a fellow by the name of Spencer Ackerman, the takedown of the FBI's training programs, which are now forced, thanks to the work of the Homeland Security Committee, Advisory Committee, and one of its subcommittees, forced to conform to basically the dictates of the Muslim Brotherhood. Patrick, I'm sure we'll talk more about that when we can in Q&A. Next slide. Mohammed Majid, another member of the advisory workshops of the Department of Homeland Security, the Countering Violent Extremism Working Group specifically. This is the outfit that actually promulgated the new guidelines that say, no kidding, if you want to do training or use trainers to tell people in the countering violent extremism business how to do their job, you have to basically get the buy-in from community leaders, partners like Mohammed Majid. Well, Mohammed Majid is not simply the imam of one of the most radical mosques in the United States, not too far from here, as a matter of fact, the All-Dulles Muslim Society, Adams Center. He is also the president of the largest Muslim Brotherhood front in the United States, the Islamic Society of North America. Next slide, please. Louis Safai. Louis is currently, interestingly enough, off as the Muslim Brotherhood figure that is jockeying to become the successor to Bashar Assad in Syria. Until recently, however, he was the endorsing agent for the chaplain corps for Muslims in the United States military. He's also been involved in training our troops in what they can think about and know and say in dealing with his co-religionists in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. Again, Patrick blew the whistle on this guy. He's been actively involved at leadership levels with the Muslim Brotherhood in a number of different very dangerous organizations. Next slide. This is probably unreadable for most of you, but it just gives you a flavor of the kinds of policies that we have been adopting since the Obama administration came to office. And believe me, this is just a subset of what you could conjure up if you wanted to do a full drill down, but they're illustrative. And as Sarah has mentioned, and I'm so glad she called it to your attention, because I think this is one of the really critical, teachable moments for all of us, is as a result of several of these policy initiatives, and I've got to tell you, I'm convinced that the people that I've just mentioned have had a hand in shaping the administration's approach to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt that has helped it take initially a majority of the seats in the parliament, that has helped it more recently take the presidency, that has given it $1.5 billion, that is engineering another $1 billion in debt relief, that is working to get some $4+ billion out of various international financial institutions, and that is about to roll out the red carpet for Mohamed Morsi in Washington. This is one of the most important tectonic shifts in our national security in our lifetimes. And I have to tell you, it just absolutely mystifies me that a president of the United States who has helped engineer this is at the moment running almost unchallenged on the platform that he's been a great commander-in-chief and foreign policy savant. This is a disaster, and we will see how much so shortly. I've got a couple of other slides here that I just would like to show you that makes it clear. Next slide. This is not a partisan critique, by the way. This chap was the previous credentialer, the one in the middle, you know the other two, Abdurrahman al-Amoudi, the previous credentialer for Muslim chaplains. Unfortunately, he was also a terrorist and the al-Qaeda financier, subsequently went to jail. But before he did, next slide, after the Clinton years, he helped this guy set up a front organization for running influence operations against Republicans. And I believe this was done with devastating effect against the George W. Bush campaign in 2000 and then Bush administration. There's an enormous amount of information about this if you're interested at MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com. I really commend it to you because Grover Norquist's role wasn't just an historical one. It continues to this day on behalf of the Muslim Brotherhood, on behalf of the government of Iran, and I think is at the moment poised to do with respect to the Romney campaign what he did to the Bush campaign in 2000. Next slide. This is just one example of how this influence operation actually put a terrorist with the then governor of the state of Texas. Next slide. I could give you a further drill down on these guys just to show there is parallelism. Each of these fellows is big-time Muslim Brotherhood. Next slide. There are things that we can do about this. There are a number of organizations that are working on this, including Emmett and its wonderful people. I spoke recently to the King Street Patriots down in Louis Gohmert's neck of the woods. Great Americans need to know that there are things they can do individually, collectively, in these groups, and as a nation. Be happy again to talk to you about that too. Next slide, please. Lastly, I just want to leave you with this thought. Back in 1961, this guy said, freedom is never more than one generation removed from extinction. We do not pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, it must be protected, and it must be handed on for them to do the same. Or we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was like to live in the United States when men were free. I don't think any of us want to do that. Next slide. More again at MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com. Thank you very much, Sarah. And
Thank you so much, Frank. Of course, you always live up to my esteem, no matter how high I set the bar.